All right, friends, we are ready for our final three chapters of Leprechauns Don't Play Basketball. I don't know about you, but I'm kind of on the edge of my seat to see what happens between Mr. O'Grady and Mrs. Jeepers. Is Mr. O'Grady really a leprechaun? Is Mrs. Jeepers a vampire? What do you think is going to happen? I don't know. Let's see. We are ready for chapter 9. Oh, nope, we're ready for chapter 10. Sorry. Chapter 10, Up to Their Eyeballs in Trouble. The next morning, the four friends huddled under the oak tree. It has to be today, Howie insisted. Grandma said leprechauns can only leave the Emerald Isle for 3 days, and this is Mr. O'Grady's third day. Liza interrupted. Let's all just leave him alone and let him go back to Ireland. We can't, Melody explained. Mr. O'Grady is bound to make his move to steal the fairy stone today. We have to stop him before he has the chance, Howie added. Eddie nodded. I'll do it today, during gym. What will we do until then? Liza asked. Just be normal, Eddie suggested as they went into the room. But Mrs. Jeepers was not her normal self. Her red hair hung limply around her face, and dark circles were underneath her dull green eyes. Her white blouse was wrinkled, and she wasn't wearing her bat bracelet. Even her green brooch seemed to have lost its shine, and she didn't smile her odd little half smile when she said, Hello, children. The rest of the morning was strange, too. Mrs. Jeepers jumped at every little noise, and her eyes kept darting toward the darkened hallway. Mrs. Jeepers seems nervous, Liza whispered. I think she's scared, Melody said softly. You'd be scared too, Howie added, if the future of the world was pinned to your shirt. Nobody said a word when Mrs. Jeepers forgot to give the spelling test. Eddie worried that she would forget about Jim too. He almost wished she would, but at 10:30, Mrs. Jeepers sighed and slumped at her desk. Boys and girls, it is time for physical education. You may walk by yourselves to the gymnasium. I will come for you at the end of the class period. Oops. Then she put her head down on her desk and was quiet. I think she's sleeping, Melody said as they tiptoed out of the room. I don't like seeing Mrs. Jeepers this way, Liza said softly. I'd like it, Eddie admitted, if it wasn't so weird. Melody stopped at the gym door. I'm afraid to go inside. We have to, Eddie said. Howie nodded. Grandma said the way to capture a leprechaun is to stare at him without blinking. It's the only magic that controls him. Once Eddie has captured him, he'll have to do whatever we say. But what if you blink? Liza worried. I don't want to think about that, Eddie shuddered. But if you do outstare him, you can get his bag of jewels and make him leave, Howie pointed out. You're right. It's now or never. Eddie gulped and rubbed his eyes with his knuckles before he followed his friends into the gym. Mr. O'Grady was waiting on the other side of the gym by the record player. Eddie didn't waste any time. He marched right up to Mr. O'Grady and tugged on his red sleeve. There's something in my eye, Eddie whined. Mr. O'Grady turned away and laughed. To be sure, 'tis nothing but your eyeball. Ha ha, Eddie said without a smile. But I'm serious, it really hurts. You have to look at it. Mr. O'Grady shooed Eddie away. Don't be a troubling me. I have a dance to be a teachin'. Then he turned on the record player and started dancing to the Irish tune. Howie nudged Eddie in the back. Keep trying. Eddie stepped in front of Mr. O'Grady. I'll be your partner, he said. But Mr. O'Grady leapt away. Eddie spent the entire gym time chasing his teacher around the hopping third graders. Eddie was almost ready to give up when he ran smack dab into Mr. O'Grady as he was doing a twirl. Eddie hopped up and tried to look into Mr. O'Grady's eyes, but Mr. O'Grady was not to be tricked. He reached into his little pouch and sidestepped Eddie. Watch out, Melody squealed. He has a magic stone. Eddie jumped back and joined his three friends. Why might you be a-thinking I have magic? Mr. O'Grady asked softly. We know who you are. Eddie blurted. And we know why you're here. We're going to stop you, Howie added. Mr. O'Grady pulled out the small red jewel from his pouch. 'Tis foolish to be a thinking you can stop me. Chapter 11, Swing Your Partner. Melody gasped when the door swung open and Mrs. Jeepers stepped into the gym. We've got to do something, Melody gasped. But it was too late. Mr. O'Grady dashed to the door and grabbed Mrs. Jeepers' hands. He started to twirl her around the gym, keeping time to the music. Look, Carrie squealed. Mrs. Jeepers is dancing with Mr. O'Grady. The rest of the kids pointed and laughed. Everybody, that is, except Howie, Liza, Melody, and Eddie. They stared as Mr. O'Grady spun Mrs. Jeepers faster and faster around the gym. Her black shoes flew off the floor and her long red hair was swept back. He's going too fast, Liza cried as she headed for the dancing teachers. Mrs. Jeepers can't reach her brooch. He's going to snatch it, Howie warned. Not if I can help it, Eddie yelled, following Liza. Just as Mr. O'Grady reached for the sparkling brooch, Eddie dived and grabbed the little man's ankle. Mr. O'Grady went crashing to the floor. Without thinking, Liza plopped on his chest. Mr. O'Grady gasped and looked straight at the little girl holding him down. Liza stared back at the blue eyes of a wrinkled little man. Don't look away, Howie shouted. Whatever you do, don't blink. Liza took a slow breath, but she kept her eyes on Mr. O'Grady. It's working, Melody said from behind her. He can't take his eyes away. Tell him now, Howie added. Liza nodded. It's not that we don't like you. It's that Mrs. Jeepers was here first. I'm not going to stop staring until you promise to leave her alone and leave Bailey Elementary. So that's the way it is, Mr. O'Grady winced. Mrs. Jeepers towered over Mr. O'Grady and Liza. Her green eyes flashed and she gently rubbed the green brooch at her throat. The stone seemed to glow as she spoke. The children are correct. A school is not the proper place for your shenanigans. Mrs. Jeepers reached down to help Liza to her feet. Liza glanced at her teacher's outstretched hand. As soon as Liza looked away, Mr. O'Grady scrambled up. A slow grin spread across his wrinkled face. The lively jig wasn't meant to be a cause and harm. We folk must dance to live. Mrs. Jeepers' eyes flashed at the little man. Then she walked away. The class fell into line behind her as she left the gym. Liza squeezed in behind Melody, Howie, and Eddie. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't mean to look away. That's all right, Melody said. Besides, maybe you stared at him long enough. After all, he was looking at you when you told him to leave. I just hope you're right, Howie said softly. Chapter 12, The End of the Rainbow. It started to sprinkle shortly before lunch, and angry storm clouds dumped sheets of rain during math. Mrs. Jeepers didn't mention her strange dance in the gym that morning, but she did seem more cheerful. The rain slowed to a sprinkle during science, and by the time the bell rang to end the school day, the sun was trying to peep through the clouds. Melody, Liza, Eddie, and Howie stood under the oak tree. Big drops fell from the branches and plopped on their heads. Look, Melody pointed, a rainbow. Liza, Howie, and Eddie looked to see a full rainbow arching across the sky. It's beautiful, Liza said. I wonder if it really does lead to the Emerald Isle. We'll know tomorrow, Howie said, if Mr. O'Grady is gone. When Mrs. Jeepers greeted the children the next morning, she looked like her regular self. She wore black pointy boots, a black skirt, a starched white lace collar, and her bat bracelet. At her neck was the sparkling green brooch. Her hair was swept back in a proper ponytail, and she smiled her odd little half smile. Good morning, children. Did you get to see the lovely rainbow yesterday? Yes, it was the biggest rainbow I've ever seen, Melody said. The rainbow seemed to put everyone in a good mood. Everyone, that is, except Coach Ellison. He nearly growled when the kids got to the gym. I don't know what you did to Mr. O'Grady, but whatever it was, you made him leave. He left me a note saying he wanted to go back home where it was safe. All right, Howie slapped Eddie on the back. We did it. I guess we showed him who the master tricksters are, Eddie bragged. Liza smiled. I guess Bailey Elementary isn't big enough for a vampire and a leprechaun. Melody giggled. I don't think Bailey Elementary is big enough for a leprechaun and us. That is the end of Leprechauns Don't Play Basketball. I hope that you enjoyed that story.